My name's Daniel McCaffrey, and I couldn't help noticing in the press and all over the place the other day that an old sparring partner of mine, Shane Te Pou, was making the news. It was everywhere, in all the papers and the TV. Shane was offended. He decided to import the Charlottesville and the American passion for disturbance about monuments and statues into New Zealand. While I remembered way back to 30, 40 years ago when I offended the same Shane Te Pou. So one of those contentious meetings in the 80s in the Labour Party, I'd stepped out into the hall and ran into Shane and in a friendly manner, lower the tensions, I said, "G'day, Shane me boyo." Old Irish word, boyo. Well, Shane reacted like a cut snake. He said, "Don't call me boy." I'd travelled in America a bit and I knew that in that context it is an insult. I said, "Shane, that's not what I said. I said that's an Irish term. It's simply a friendly greeting." But he was determined to continue to be offended. And I thought to myself, well, that's a whole new political notion. Conjuring up being offended and using it as a weapon in a political context. Well, Shane's back with being offended again. As I said, he wants to introduce the American division rancour about statues and what they stand for and who they are into New Zealand. So he selected the monument at Otahu. Now, I've driven past that monument hundreds of times in the 60s in a little green van going out to Papakura. And I never knew what it was just the monument. And Shane said about the person for whom the monument stands, he launched into the idea that the monument represented, quoting, "a Eurocentric historical worldview that inhibits a full reckoning with New Zealand's past." Now, I never thought that the monument in Otahu required any reckoning with New Zealand's past up till these last few weeks when Shane has brought this American nation of monuments into New Zealand. "It should not be standing in memory of who I think was a thug." Quote. Well, that's Shane's view of this person. This monument stands as a monument to Colonel Marmaduke Nixon, the leader of the colonialist troops, that is, the troops raised in the colony, not the British Army, in the battles of 1864 on the Waikato. He's buried beneath it. He was moved in 1968 when they were building the motorway in Simon Street. And we know that the people of that time, what they thought of Marmaduke Nixon was that he was a decent, honourable man. The Herald reported, for instance, when he died, quote, "New Zealand has lost an able and energetic colonist who was respected by all classes of the community and beloved by all who had the pleasure of intimacy with him." And they spent money building the monument. That's what they thought. He was a respected member of the Indian Army. He was the leader of New Zealand's first army contingent, so to speak. And that's the person of whom Shane takes such deep offence, that we celebrate the life of men like Colonel Nixon, and that Shane alleges, Nixon pursued Maori as prey, including women and children, who died during his notorious and deadly attack on Rangiaowiha, says Shane. Indeed. Well, Shane's got a great track record for being offended. He offended Andrew Little a bit when he stuck his nose into that debacle about the Chinese property names that the Labour Party was using. He wanted an apology from Andrew because his wife's name was on the list. She's Chinese. That's stepping out there to get offended, in my view. And I think he offended a great number of people in the Labour Party. He's the guy that got Mr. Liu on the track to becoming a citizen. He got $10,000 to introduce Mr. Liu to all the people in the Labour Party that Shane made acquaintance with over the years, who had become by that time senior ministers in Helen Clark's government. And I don't think those ministers hold a very high opinion of Mr. Shane Te Pou, or have a very high opinion of his ability to judge character. He's a very poor judge of character in that instance, Shane Te Pou. But look, that's just Shane racking up whatever he could and trying to stick his oar in, I am offended, and trying to import the American dissension, division, ill will that prevails their country about monuments. Shane's offended, and he wants to lead this campaign and be offended about monuments in New Zealand. Well, that's all right. That's just Shane, and you can ask a dozen people their opinion, you'll find out the truth about Shane. Now, what disturbs me most is the reaction of the media and the press. Duncan Garner got him on. Duncan will get anyone on. Two jackers fighting in a bar in Timaru, and Duncan will get them on as long as it looks as though it'll be controversial and he can rack things up. And he's a presenter, he's not a reporter, so but a stash and a canvas, Shane will supply that in spades. Now, what disturbed me was the story by Mihirangi Forbes of Radio New Zealand. She didn't go out and research the life of Marmaduke Nixon or find out what the monument was there, or why people held him in such high esteem, or what actually happened at the battles in the Waikato. No, she got on the phone. She rang up some academics. She rang up Professor Tom Rowe. And Tom obviously was caught on the hop. He had no idea that the monument existed, but no, he knows about it. He's concerned. And then she interviewed a bystander in Otahu, some Joe standing in the street, who had a vague idea that it was colonialists and on the side of the British, but that's all he knew. No idea it was for Mr. Nixon. And then she interviewed three jokers in the pub, staunch Pākehās. They had no idea what the monument was about. So Mihirangi was going around finding out that no one had been offended because no one knew what it was about. It was just the monument in Otahu. So she rang up a Toroa. And he was obviously caught in the hop too. He says a conversation should be had about the monument, which is, a general sort of statement which we have. And he expressed his general views that the battle in the Waikato had been marginalised. Well, a lot of things are marginalised. Then she interviewed a woman over the road. And this woman had Māori ancestors in the Waikato. He'd actually been involved in the battles down there. She never knew who Marmaduke Nixon was or what the monument was about. And but now she did. Well, she was concerned, and she didn't think it was appropriate. So Shane's little campaign was working its magic. So it's a petition. Shane usually does this. He makes sure that it's a document that someone in office has to deal with. So, someone has to react to it. So that was Mihirangi Forbes' view of it, and I think she did herself no credit. She could have researched what the monument was about, that the chap was actually buried there, and what the battles were about in the Waikato. But she passed that by. So Shane's allegations stand uncontended. Well, Farah Hancock, a newsroom, pitched in, wrote a story. Now, she's only in her final year of the Wintex journalism program, so you can cut her a bit of slack. She's learning the trade. And of course she did what any journo does these days. She rang up the academics who know all these things. And she got in touch with Damon Salisa, Auckland Associate Professor of Pacific Studies at the University of Auckland. And Damon, caught on the hop, never seen the monument, doesn't know what's written on it, says that Shane's call to relocate could be reasonable, but that there are other options that should be considered. And then launches into the notions of, monuments and statues generally, not knowing the particular instance, that they shouldn't be just allowed to speak and capture the public memory. Well, you see, on this monument, there are no inflammatory statements, there are no sort of calls either side. It simply says, to the memory of Marmaduke C. Nixon, who died of wounds in the Waikato War. That's all it says. There's no statements as to for or against anything. It's to his memory. Well, Damon Salisa, Associate Professor, went on in the general idea of they're not the best way to redress history. They could be repugnant to some people. Well, this statue stood for 149 years on that corner. No one knew what it was much. And there we are. The interpretation of statues. I think the good professor thinks that it's a statue and not just a stone obelisk. The interpretation has to be robust. But this is what professors do these days in a postmodern world where there is no truth and where dead are rules. It's not unreasonable for the professor to say. But the good professor is the only one to know that actually Colonel Nixon's remains are buried there. So what Shane is asking is to countermand the high esteem and opinion of the citizens of Franklin who elected Marmaduke Nixon as their Member of Parliament, the citizens of the colony in Auckland who decided to make him the leader of the colonialist contingent in the war, and who said such fine things about him, that his monument should be removed and he should lie there in his grave unmarked, and that the opinion and of the ideas of the people of his time should be swept away, and he should lie there as the unknown soldier. That's Shane Te Pou's idea. However, there we are. We're left with Shane manifesting offence, as he so often does, making damn sure it gets into the public space, having a whole lot of reporters and people run around commenting on it, and becoming famous for a week or two. I find that the saddest thing is that the press never took the opportunity to really look into the life of the man whom the monument was built for, and that we go round on Shane's little expedition to raise rancour and rip the scab of history in New Zealand and set us one against the other, against statutes and monuments. The good news is, I think anyway, New Zealanders are far too level-headed and too full of common sense to get around the road with a joker like Shane Te Pou and his inflammatory opinions and accusations against the dead who cannot answer back, and take him into a court of law for his scurrilous assertions, and that we won't be racked up about it. That's the good news. But we'll have to wait. I'm sure that Shane will be offended again sometime in the future.